My wife walked out on me and our kids for a wealthy guy. I want to live the rich life. 2 years later, she returned expecting me to drop my girlfriend for her. The words hit me like a physical blow. I want a divorce. I want a richer life. My entire world tilted on its axis, but I had no idea the real heartbreak was still waiting. I can still feel the cold weight of those words, spoken across the same kitchen table where we'd shared thousands of meals. The air went still, thick with unspoken futures, and a silence settled that screamed louder than any argument. I remember thinking the hardest part would be that moment, those chilling words. But I was wrong. The hardest part turned out to be watching how quickly Chloe started treating our kids like they were my project, not our shared life. This is my story, Ethan, and how my wife left me for what she called the rich life, disappeared for 2 years, then came back expecting me to drop everything, including the woman who actually stayed. By then, I'd learned something she never would: love isn't about perfectly filtered Instagram stories from Los Angeles rooftop bars. It's about showing up when your child has a fever at 3 in the morning. Let me take you back to when things were normal, or at least what I thought was normal. Looking back, I can see the tiny cracks forming even in our happiest moments. We weren't wealthy, but we were solid. I worked as an operations manager at a logistics company. Steady income, decent benefits, nothing flashy, but reliable. Chloe worked part-time at a dental office, handling scheduling and patient coordination. Our apartment was a 2-bedroom in a quiet Seattle neighborhood, the kind of place where kids rode bikes in the parking lot and neighbors knew each other. It wasn't huge, but it was ours, filled with Leo's soccer trophies and Mia's drawings covering the fridge like wallpaper. Weekend mornings, I'd make pancakes while the kids argued about cartoons. Chloe would shuffle in, still half asleep, and steal bites off their plates. Those moments felt complete in a way I didn't appreciate until they were gone. We had routines that weren't exciting, but they were ours. Homework at the kitchen table, me helping Leo with fractions, Chloe braiding Mia's hair for school. Movie nights, all of us piled on the couch under blankets. Sunday cleaning sessions with old music blasting, dancing with the vacuum cleaner. It wasn't the life you see in magazines, but it was real. And I truly thought we were happy. But somewhere along the way, Chloe started measuring our life against a ruler I didn't even know existed. The change began so slowly, I almost missed it. She'd come home from meeting her friends, and suddenly our apartment felt smaller, our car older. Our lake house vacation felt embarrassing compared to wherever her friends had gone. Her friend group had shifted over the past year, women from the gym and the dental office, all dating or married to men who worked in finance or owned businesses. The kind of guys who posted pictures from Los Angeles on a random Wednesday. Chloe started spending more time on her phone, scrolling through their stories, double-tapping photos of designer handbags and restaurant meals that cost more than our weekly grocery budget. I'd catch her staring at her screen with this look, like she just realized she'd been living in black and white while everyone else got color. She never said, "I love you less." She just started saying things like, "Olivia's boyfriend took her to Sonoma for the weekend." Or, "Did you see Sophia's new car?" At first, I'd laugh it off, make some joke about our own kind of wealth. But the jokes started landing flat because she wasn't laughing anymore. The breaking point arrived on a completely regular evening. Nothing special. I was at our small desk in the living room corner, going through our monthly budget spreadsheet. That's what responsible adults do, calculating the payment for the apartment we were saving to buy, the kids' school expenses, car insurance, all the usual stuff that keeps a family running. Chloe was on the couch, phone in hand, and I could hear the little swoosh sounds from Instagram stories, meaning she was tapping through dozens of posts. When I glanced over, the glow of her screen reflected on her face, all those carefully filtered images of luxury and ease. Then she just exploded, not screaming, but this frustrated outburst: "This is it? This is our life? Bills and budgets and nothing exciting ever?" I looked up from my laptop, confused. We'd just taken the kids to the amusement park 2 weeks ago. We'd had a great time, but apparently that didn't count. She kept going, talking about how her friends were living real lives, getting surprised with jewelry and trips, how their partners made things happen instead of just maintaining. A cold dread settled in my chest because I realized she wasn't talking about our marriage anymore. She was talking about a transaction she felt she'd lost out on. I tried to stay calm, asked her what she wanted, what would make her happy. She looked at me with distant eyes and said, "I don't know. Maybe I just want more." But she couldn't tell me what more meant. Just that whatever we had wasn't it. The next few weeks were brutal in a quiet, suffocating way. We didn't fight loudly or throw things. We just existed in the same space while she pulled further and further away. The kids noticed, even though we tried to hide it. Leo asked me why Mommy was always on her phone now, and I didn't have a good answer. Then one night, after the kids were asleep, she sat me down and said it clearly: she wanted a divorce. She needed to explore what else life could offer. Said she felt like she'd settled too young and missed out on experiences. I could have begged, promised to somehow make more money, or be more exciting, or whatever she thought she needed. But something in me just went still and quiet. I realized you can't compete with a fantasy. You can't win against an Instagram feed. If she wanted to chase that life, no amount of pancake breakfasts or stable love was going to stop her. So I said, okay. I told her if that's what she wanted, we'd do it the right way. No drama, no fighting. We'd split custody fairly and keep things civil for the kids. I think my calmness broke something in her. She'd expected a fight, expected me to fall apart and prove how much I needed her. But instead, I was already thinking practically about how to protect Leo and Mia from the fallout. She moved out within a month, found a small studio apartment closer to downtown, where her friends lived. We set up a custody schedule that started as 50-50, but within weeks became more like 70-30 because she kept having plans come up, girls' trips and dinners and events that apparently couldn't be rescheduled around her parenting time. The kids would pack their little backpacks to go stay with her and come back confused, telling me about how Mommy's apartment was tiny and didn't have space for their toys, how she'd let them watch TV instead of doing homework because she had to get ready to go out. I never said anything negative about her to them. That was a line I refused to cross. But I started keeping detailed records of every missed pickup, every schedule change, every time I had to leave work early because she'd forgotten she was supposed to have them. Our divorce was finalized after 3 months. Quick and clean, because there wasn't much to fight over. She didn't want the apartment or the savings. She wanted freedom, and I gave it to her while keeping the only things that mattered, our kids and the stability they desperately needed. I thought the pain would fade once it was official, once the papers were signed and she was legally free to chase whatever life she imagined was waiting for her. But actually, it got harder. Because then I had to watch from a distance as she transformed into someone I didn't recognize. Posting stories from expensive restaurants with men whose faces she never quite showed, wearing clothes I knew she couldn't afford. Talking about manifesting abundance and living her best life while our kids asked why Mommy didn't come to Leo's soccer games anymore. The worst part wasn't losing her. I'd made peace with that. The worst part was watching her choose the performance of happiness over the real thing. Choosing validation from strangers online over the 2 little people who just wanted their mom to show up and be present. I'd lie in bed at night in our apartment, which felt too big and too empty now, listening to the sound of the kids breathing in their rooms. I'd think about how she'd said love didn't pay for trips or jewelry. And I'd wonder if she'd ever understand that love actually paid for everything that mattered, the boring stuff, the 3 a.m. fevers, the patient homework help, the showing up day after day, even when it wasn't glamorous or Instagram-worthy. But by then, she was already gone. Already posting champagne flutes at sunset, already convinced she'd escaped instead of abandoned. All I could do was pick up the pieces and try to build something stable from the wreckage she'd left behind. The first time Mia asked me when Mommy was coming home, I told her the truth as gently as I could. I said, Mommy has her own place now, and we'll see her on weekends. But 3 months later, when she asked the same question with this tiny, broken voice, I realized she wasn't asking about a visit. She was asking if our family would ever be whole again. I had to excuse myself to the bathroom, where I sat on the edge of the tub and cried as quietly as possible, because I didn't want them to hear me fall apart. Those first 6 months after Chloe left were the hardest stretch of my life. Not because I missed her, I was already past that, but because I had to be everything for Leo and Mia while pretending I had it all figured out. Some days I'd get them to school, come home, and just sit in the silence of our apartment, wondering how the hell I was supposed to do this alone for the next 10 years. I stopped checking Chloe's social media after the first month because it was like watching a stranger cosplay as my ex-wife. All these photos at rooftop lounges and luxury hotels with captions about deserving more and choosing yourself. Mutual friends would occasionally mention seeing her out with different guys, always someone in finance or real estate. Always someone who looked like they'd never changed a diaper or helped with homework in their entire life. The kids' custody time with her became increasingly unpredictable. She'd have them for a weekend and return them Sunday night wired on sugar and exhausted because she'd taken them to some expensive brunch spot instead of letting them just be kids. Or she'd cancel last minute with vague excuses about work events or feeling under the weather. I'd have to comfort two confused children who couldn't understand why mommy's new life didn't seem to have much room for them. Leo started acting out at school. His teacher called me in for a conference because he'd gotten into a fight with another kid. When I asked him about it later that night, he just said the other kid had two parents who lived together, and he'd gotten jealous, which broke something in me I didn't even know could still break. Mia developed this habit of clutching her stuffed rabbit whenever we talked about mommy. This little unconscious tell that she was anxious. I'd watch her do it while pretending everything was fine, and wonder what kind of therapy bills I'd be paying in 10 years because of all this. My life became this endless cycle of work and parenting with no break in between. I'd get up at 6 to make breakfast and pack lunches, drop the kids at school, work a full day while fielding texts from teachers or the school nurse, pick them up, and immediately start the homework, dinner, bath, bedtime routine. Then I'd collapse on the couch at 9 and do it all over again the next day. I stopped accepting invitations to go out because I had no energy and no babysitter. Stopped dating because the idea of explaining my situation to someone new felt exhausting. Stopped doing pretty much anything that wasn't directly related to keeping my kids fed and emotionally stable. My brother called me once and said I sounded like a robot. Said I needed to take care of myself, too. But I didn't know how to explain that I didn't have the bandwidth for myself. That every ounce of energy I had went into making sure Leo and Mia felt loved and secure, despite their mother essentially abandoning them for Instagram likes and expensive dinners. Around the 1-year mark, I started hearing things through mutual friends, that Chloe's glamorous life wasn't quite what it seemed. Whispers about her dating a guy who turned out to be married, about her bouncing between apartments because she couldn't afford the rent in the trendy neighborhood she wanted, about her working multiple part-time gigs to fund the lifestyle she was posting about. Part of me felt vindicated, but mostly I just felt sad for her. Sad that she'd blown up our family chasing some fantasy that was never real to begin with, and sad that our kids were paying the price for her midlife crisis, or whatever you want to call it. She'd still show up for her scheduled weekends sometimes, always looking polished and put together. She'd take the kids to do something expensive like a trampoline park or a fancy movie theater. But she'd bring them back, and they'd tell me about how mommy spent most of the time on her phone, or how she'd gotten frustrated when they acted like normal kids instead of accessories to her new life. Then, around month 15, something shifted. I was at Leo's soccer game on a Saturday morning, one of those cold early games where your breath makes clouds and you're clutching terrible coffee just to stay warm. I noticed this woman sitting a few rows down who I'd seen at previous games but never really paid attention to. Her name was Isabel, and she had a son on Leo's team. After the game, while we were all standing around watching the kids chase each other, she struck up a conversation about how chaotic Saturday mornings were with youth sports. Something about the way she laughed, genuine and unpretentious, made me realize I hadn't had a normal adult conversation in months. We started talking more at games and practices. Nothing romantic, just friendly parent chat. She mentioned she was divorced, too. Said her ex had moved to another state for work and saw their son maybe once a month. There was this unspoken understanding between us, this recognition of each other's exhaustion and determination to show up. Anyway, Isabel started appearing in our lives gradually, so slowly I almost didn't notice at first. She'd offer a carpool to practice and stay to chat afterward, or we'd end up at the same playground on Sunday afternoons and the kids would play together while we talked. She never pried into my situation, but she listened when I needed to vent. More importantly, she was just easy to be around. No drama or demands or expectations, just presence. One evening, about 6 months after we'd started becoming friends, Mia came down with a nasty fever, the kind that spikes to 103 and makes you panic. I was juggling trying to get her temperature down while also making sure Leo ate dinner and did his homework. Isabel texted, asking how Mia was doing because Leo had mentioned it at practice. I admitted I was overwhelmed, and she showed up 20 minutes later with soup and children's medicine. Didn't make a big deal about it. Just helped me get through the evening and left once things were under control. That night, after the kids were asleep, I sat in the kitchen and realized I hadn't felt that supported since before my marriage fell apart. Things developed naturally from there. Isabel would come over on weekends and help Leo with a science project or play board games with Mia. She'd join us for pizza nights and somehow make our little apartment feel less empty. The kids started lighting up when she was around, in a way that made my chest tight, because they were so starved for positive adult attention that wasn't coming from their mother. I was terrified to let myself feel anything for her. What if I screwed it up? What if the kids got attached, and then she left too? What if I was just using her as a band-aid for my loneliness? But she was patient with my hesitation. Never pushed for more than I could give. Slowly, I started to trust that maybe this could be something real. We didn't rush into anything. Didn't even kiss until we'd known each other for 8 months. When we finally had the conversation about being in a relationship, it felt less like falling and more like choosing. Choosing stability and kindness and someone who showed up not for the Instagram story, but for the regular, boring Tuesday nights. The kids adjusted to having Isabel around faster than I expected. She never tried to replace Chloe or act like a mom. She was just herself, and that authenticity made all the difference. She'd sit on the floor doing puzzles with Mia or throw a football with Leo in the parking lot. They started mentioning her casually, like she was just part of their world now. I felt guilty sometimes, wondering if I had the right to move on when Chloe was out there somewhere, presumably living her best life. But then I'd watch Isabel help Mia sound out words for a school project or listen to Leo's rambling stories about his day with genuine interest. And I'd realize this wasn't about replacing anything. It was about building something new from the pieces we all had left. Life felt manageable again. Not perfect, but stable. We had routines that worked and a little chosen family that showed up for each other. For the first time in 2 years, I could breathe without feeling like I was drowning in responsibility and loneliness. Then one afternoon, I was at work, staring at spreadsheets, when my phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. But somehow, I knew immediately who it was, even before I opened it. The text said, "We need to talk. I want to come back to the family." My stomach dropped, not because I missed her or wanted her back, but because I knew whatever conversation we were about to have was going to blow up the careful stability I'd built. I thought about Isabel and the kids, and the life we'd created together. I knew with absolute certainty that I wasn't going to let Chloe walk back in and destroy it just because she'd finally realized the grass wasn't greener. It was just different grass, with its own problems. And now she wanted to come back to the lawn she'd set on fire. I agreed to meet Chloe at a coffee shop halfway between our places, neutral territory where neither of us had a home advantage. I showed up 15 minutes early because I needed time to settle my nerves and remember why I was doing this. Not to reconcile, but to set boundaries that should have existed from the beginning. She walked in looking different. Still put together, but there was something tired around her eyes, something that expensive concealer couldn't quite hide. She smiled at me like we were old friends meeting for a catch-up instead of two people whose marriage had imploded because she'd wanted champagne problems instead of real life. She started talking before I'd even finished my coffee. This rehearsed speech about how she'd grown so much over the past 2 years, how she'd learned that money and excitement weren't everything, how she'd realized family was what mattered. I let her finish because I wanted to hear exactly how she'd justify abandoning our kids for Instagram validation and late-night bottle service. When she finally paused for breath, she said, "I want us to try again. I want to come back." I looked at her across that table and felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no longing, not even satisfaction. Just this calm certainty that she was no longer my problem to solve. I kept my voice even when I responded. I told her that ship had sailed the moment she'd chosen her new life over our family. I told her she was still Leo and Mia's mother, and I'd never interfere with that relationship, but she and I were done. Permanently and completely done. She blinked like she'd been slapped, like it had never occurred to her that I might have moved on. Then her expression shifted from shock to something uglier, something entitled and accusatory. She asked if there was someone else. I told her the truth. Yes, I was seeing someone. Someone who'd been there through fevers and homework meltdowns, and all the regular moments she'd decided weren't worth her time. Chloe's face went red with an anger that had no right to exist, given she'd been the one who left. She said, "So, you replaced me." I had to fight not to laugh at the audacity. I had to remind myself that getting angry would only drag this out. So instead, I explained as simply as possible that Isabel hadn't replaced anyone. She just filled the empty space Chloe had left behind, shown up when showing up mattered. And that wasn't replacement. It was just reality. The conversation should have ended there, but Chloe wasn't done. She started talking about the kids and how they needed their real family back together. How confusing it must be for them to have some stranger playing house. That's when I felt my composure crack just slightly, because she was trying to use Leo and Mia as weapons after barely seeing them consistently for 2 years. I told her the kids were fine. Better than fine, actually. They had stability and routine and people who showed up for them every single day. And if she wanted to be more involved in their lives, I'd support that. But it would be on a schedule that worked for everyone, not just her convenience. She didn't like that answer. Started talking about how she had rights as their mother, how she could get a lawyer and fight for more custody. I pulled out my phone and showed her the document I'd been keeping, every missed pickup, every cancelled weekend, every time I'd had to rearrange my entire life because she'd flaked. I watched her face go pale as she realized I'd been documenting everything. Over the next few months, Chloe did exactly what I'd feared. She started trying to buy her way back into the kids' affections with expensive gifts and big promises. Told Leo she'd get him the new gaming system he wanted. Told Mia they'd go to Disneyland next summer, even though I knew she couldn't afford it. The kids came back from her weekends loaded down with toys and sugar, and completely off their routine. Staying up late because she didn't enforce bedtime, skipping homework because she wanted to take them to the mall instead. I'd spend the first half of every week getting them back on track. Leo's teacher emailed me, concerned because he'd stopped turning in assignments. When I asked him about it, he admitted Mommy said homework could wait because they were having special time together. I had to bite my tongue to keep from saying what I really thought about Chloe's parenting priorities. The breaking point came on a random afternoon, about 4 months after her return. Isabel was at our apartment, helping Mia practice her spelling words while I made dinner. Leo was in the living room, completely absorbed, building something with his blocks. Chloe showed up unannounced, knocking on the door. It wasn't her day, but she wanted to take the kids to some event downtown. When I opened the door and let her in, she saw Isabel sitting at the kitchen table with Mia, and she froze. I could see the rage building behind her eyes. Then Mia, sweet, innocent Mia, who didn't understand the complicated adult politics happening around her, looked up at Isabel and said, "Thanks, Mommy." Because she'd gotten stuck on a word, and Isabel had helped her. The temperature in the room dropped about 20 degrees instantly. Chloe exploded in a way I'd never seen before, started yelling about, "How dare I let some woman confuse their children? How dare I allow this disrespect of their real mother?" Isabel quietly excused herself and left while I ushered the kids to their room so they wouldn't hear the rest. Once they were gone, I turned to Chloe and finally said what needed to be said. I told her she couldn't show up sporadically and expect the kids to treat her like she'd never left. I told her that Isabel had earned their affection by being present for the boring, difficult parts of parenting that Chloe had decided weren't worth her time. I said, you don't get to come back into their lives with presents and promises and expect that to erase 2 years of absence. They need you in the regular moments too. The homework and the bedtime and the regular weekday dinners, not just the fun weekend events. She looked at me like I'd stabbed her, like I was being cruel instead of honest. After that confrontation, Chloe did something that honestly shocked me, even though it probably shouldn't have. She told the kids they weren't allowed to mention Isabel when they were with her. Said it hurt her feelings to hear about Daddy's friend. Suddenly, Leo and Mia were walking on eggshells, trying to edit their own lives to avoid upsetting their mother. They stopped talking about our weekday routines or the fun things we did as a family unit. Started treating their time with Chloe like a separate reality that couldn't touch their real life. I watched them grow more distant from her, even as she tried harder to win them over with material things. She still tells people her version of the story, the one where I turned the kids against her, or where Isabel stole her family. Never the version where she chose to leave and then couldn't handle the consequences of that choice. Years later now, with the kids in middle school, they live primarily with me and Isabel. They see their mother every other weekend when she remembers to confirm plans. They're good kids, well-adjusted, considering everything they've been through. But they're not close with Chloe the way she wishes they were. She still posts on social media about being a devoted mother. Still talks about the injustice of her situation to anyone who will listen. Still fundamentally believes that something was taken from her rather than understanding she gave it away. The scariest part isn't that she left. People leave marriages every day, and sometimes it's the right choice. The scary part is that she still doesn't understand why she couldn't just come back and have everything be the same. Still doesn't grasp that love and family aren't things you can put on hold while you explore other options. I think she's going to spend the rest of her life bitter about a loss that was entirely self-inflicted, blaming everyone except the person who actually made the choice to walk away. What would you have done?